Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. I will walk you through the front line going in reverse today because it's all happening up in Lyman and not really much else going on around the rest of the front lines, although the Donetsk front line is pretty active. But there's not a lot of movement. Remember, you can always listen to me on 1.52 times speed if I don't speak quick enough and you want to get through the content. Just press a cog on the YouTube video. Sometimes I do pause, I struggle to find words and I mix up my words. I do have multiple sclerosis, so life is a little bit tough on the cognitive front, but hopefully I do make sense overall. But yeah, you can speed me up and it means you can do more with your day. Anyway, let's jump straight into it. Here is the map of Ukraine. We'll go to the Kherson front where not a lot is happening. However, there is some toing and froing in terms of villages, particularly in the Davidi Breed front here. So the Russians did push the Ukrainians back with artillery fire and I think some plane air support. And so there are villages that are swapping hands. It does make the pro-Ukrainians sort of wonder about how many forces are down here with the Ukrainians. Is this simply just a waiting game and one is happy to just let a few villages go back and forth over time because it's you don't want your troops to be involved in a meat grinder where they're just the attrition is just grinding them down, because at the end of the day the Ukrainians want to preserve as many of their forces as possible, especially if they're half decent experienced soldiers that are involved in that. I'm not sure exactly what forces there are on the Kherson front line, but the Russian forces are experienced and there are some pretty decent naval infantry brigades. These are fairly decent soldiers. There's about 25,000 soldiers here. There's a huge concentration of troops. So when we go up to Lyman, that's about 3,000 in the Lyman area, although it is a smaller area. Okay, so the Ukrainians are still hitting the supply lines. They're still hitting pontoon bridges and pontoon ferries that are being attempted to be constructed and with a view of resupplying these Russian troops. The Zaporizhzhia front line, pretty quiet, not a lot going on. There's a couple of villages, being attacked. There's a bit of fighting going on around here towards the Donetsk line, but other than that, around this area, the Zaporizhzhia front line really is fairly quiet. This is where you got Chechen forces, as in pro-Ukrainian Chechens around here. But there's not a lot going on. Donetsk front line, it is fairly fierce. Not a lot of movement in terms of territory, but the Russians really are pushing all along the Donetsk front line. And indeed, around Bakhmut, again, typically fierce, there is a place called New York, which is named after New York. The new, when transliterated into English, is NIU, New York. And that has long been a bit of a target for the Russians. They seem to want New York, and I guess not for a particularly important strategic reason, but because, I don't know, maybe it's emblematic of America and their support of Ukraine. And they are pushing to New York again at the moment, it seems, fighting on the outskirts. But as with all of these attacks, they're generally, as it has been for the last month, they're generally repulsed by the Ukrainian forces. There's just a lot of fighting going on up and down here. But really, it's all about this Izium and Lyman area. Sorry, not Izium particularly anymore. It's the Lyman area, and Lyman being operationally encircled. There has been movement today. Let's just go up north before I return to the main story in Lyman. So up north, you've got Kupiansk, and you do have a little bit of movement in the Kupiansk area. So this is what I showed yesterday, that this is where the Ukrainians had liberated. So there was Kucherivka and all the way down to Kivcherivka, a couple of places in between, Podoli. Now, it turns out there's Novosinove, this village right at the south there. That's an extra liberated settlement for the Ukrainians. So they pushed a little bit further south on the eastern side of the Oskil River. There's a little bit of movement there, but not a huge amount of movement, to be honest. Okay, so let's return really to the Izium encirclement, which is the important movement today. It's worth knowing that in this bridgehead, so there was movement north yesterday, and there was a little bit of a push, and I can show you that. So yesterday's map that I showed you, here was my map from 2 days ago, the red line, and here's the almost encirclement of Lyman. And yesterday, the Ukrainians pushed a little bit further north towards Pidliman, and further up north here, a few villages in this section. However, not been a lot of change here. Now, there's a little bit of consternation, let's say, as to why that is, because the idea is that there is no real Russian resistance here. And actually, it would be very easy for the Ukrainians, if they had enough forces, and there's been reason to believe that they've been loading a bunch of forces in this northern area, that they could actually push to Zvatove fairly easily, right? But they haven't. And they haven't done so because one might think because they want Lyman sort of tied up and done. They don't want issues behind their lines going on down here. So maybe they want this front to be fairly contiguous or unbroken and simple before pushing on towards Svatove. Or it could be that they don't have the forces to do that. How many forces do they have here? We know they are getting reinforcements from the southeast to bolster their encirclement of Lyman, but how many forces really are there? Well, it's difficult to say. So what has been going on? Well, this is a video that has been doing the rounds. What does this show? This shows a bunch of people in the field. Okay, but it seems to be confirmed that this is evidence that the Russians are fleeing from their points around Lyman, from their positions, under heavy Ukrainian artillery fire. Although you can't see that right here. This is video evidence, supposedly, but pretty much confirmed, that the Russians are fleeing from certain positions. And this is, not a good time to be Russian in that area of the world. And in fact, Telegram channels are reporting Russians saying, what's going on? What's the command doing? Now, what is it? This is just a Russian map of what's been going on. What is interesting about this, and there's a parallel to Severodonetsk, when the Ukrainians pulled out of Severodonetsk. It's the parallel is that apparently that was Zelensky saying, no, we need to hold that for as long as possible. And that's a politician getting involved in a tactical battlefield decision making process. And there was a bit of criticism going on, say, oh, really, we should have pulled out, we should have done a tactical withdrawal, kept our troops and equipment far safer, and done a tactical withdrawal that still there's still attrition going on with the Russian troops and their advance. But we are controlling that situation. Well, apparently Putin is the one that has said, no, the Russians have to stay in Lyman and we need to hold out for as long as possible, which is, and the idea that a politician who is not a general is getting involved in battlefield decisions and decision making. And this could be to the cost of all those troops. And this is, not really optimal for the Russian forces. Now, I said for days that the Russians should have pulled out there and given. So let's go to my map. So this is what the map was yesterday and the day before. The 2 days ago was a red line. Then the Ukrainians took some areas in the north yesterday and towards Pidliman, and this area up here. The idea is that, why haven't they pushed further on to Zvatove, given that there's no resistance? But the Russians didn't do a tactical sort of operational level sensible withdrawal. They didn't get out of there because Putin has kept them in there, and as a result, they're going to lose a lot of troops. There's about 3,000 odd troops in there and equipment, and that is a big loss. Why would they want that? Yes, they're going to hold the Ukrainians there for a week longer. Is that super important? Is that worth those troops and that equipment? Is it a case of Putin's reasoning being, well, we can hold out for as long as possible to protect these settlements until the mobilization troops get in there. That could be the reason. Is it worth it? Who knows? Time will tell. So we have seen, and this is really, really recent. No other sort of frontline analysis has got this yet, because this has just come out in the last sort of 10 minutes or so, an hour, or certainly within the last hour, which is some guy in Yampil, a Ukrainian serviceman in Yampil, saying, "Hey, we're in Yampil." That's basically what that little video does, which is to say, this is zooming in a little bit. This is how it was yesterday. And you had this neck of, a neck of access out of or into Lyman for the Russians. So you could get supplies in. However, this was under at least partial fire control, which is to say that if you're going to drive in some trucks to supply your troops here, that's going to get hit by artillery or even, short-range rocket fires from manpads or whatever. Or from anti-tank weaponry. So, yeah, that was not looking good yesterday, but they were holding out in Drobysheve and Chandri Holove. Today, it's looking worse. So Yampil appears to have fallen down here, which means that now the Ukrainians hold this area, and it's really just Torske. And also Stavki is now liberated and under Ukrainian control, and Chandri Holove has fallen back to the Ukrainians. So now this net is closing in, and in fact, this is what it looks like. So the purple area is what they've done in the last 24 hours. You've got there's a tiny little village here that is still holding out, but you basically got Drobysheve and Lyman, and then really it's Zareshne and Torske as your way out of this net that is closing in and closing in. I don't know that there's too much attacking going on from the south. Like, as I said yesterday, it's more about closing in the net from the flanks. And the writing's on the wall, because actually, you're not getting out of here easily. All the Ukrainians really need to do is take here, or even, cut across here. You don't even need to do the urban warfare through here. Now, it's a bit of a problem because there's a lake, but then it means that the Russians can't get out of that lake. So all you need to do is sort of make a corridor here where the Russians just can't get out. Okay, they could try and attack from the rear here, but if you've got a decent amount of troops here, then you have completely encircled Lyman. Then, I mean, there is operational encirclement really happening effectively. But yeah, writing's on the wall there. Anyway, so that's what's going on the front line. We'll now move on to a few nuggets. What nuggets do I have for you? Now, the first thing to say before I get on to the particular little nuggets is, overall, we're at a situation where Ukraine is dictating the war. They're dictating the pace. They're dictating where things are happening. Yes, the Russians are doing what they're doing on this Donetsk, Luhansk front line here, but that's what they've always been doing. Well, they've been doing for months. Really, Ukraine is dictating what is going on, both in Kherson and up in the Lyman area. This is Ukraine's war that they are now fighting, because that momentum has shifted, and now the Russians are on the defensive. So the Russians are sending troops where Ukraine is dictating they have to send troops. This is an interesting shift in control, and I think that says a lot. Just talking a little bit about the conscription, the referenda. So you will have heard that 4 regions have had a referendum. The stats were complete. It was just utterly sham. What's been happening and what will happen over the next few days is the 4 leaders, 2 sort of separatist leaders here from Luhansk and Donetsk, and 2 Russian-appointed leaders from Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, have gone to Moscow to ratify the deal. And basically, early October, these will be officially, at least as far as Russia is concerned, territories of Russia. And they've said, okay, we only have 60% of Zaporizhzhia, as this whole area is not under Russian control, but they have said, oh, okay, when we control the whole of Zaporizhzhia, we'll give you another referendum here in this area that we don't yet control. And of course, that'll be sham as well, but they're unlikely to be able to take that. So what is this doing? Well, what this is all about is the territorial integrity of Russia in terms of what they said in a speech about a week ago. I say they, Putin. So as I've just written for Only Sky yesterday, Russia to illegally annex 4 more areas in Ukraine. Just giving the news about this. But what the important, and here the statistics, completely unrealistic statistics. 99% of people in Donetsk. Okay, well, there was a gunpoint. 2, it wasn't even confidential. 3, there's now evidence that ballots that said no one were thrown away. It was just every democratic ideal and rule was broken for that. But really, let's concentrate a little bit on what Putin said about a week ago, which is, I would like to remind those who this is when he was threatening the world with nuclear warfare in his nuclear blackmail. And it was completely hypocritical. He said, I would like to remind those who make such statements about Russia that our country also possesses various means of destruction, and in some cases they are more modern than those of NATO countries. When the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, we, of course, will use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people. I'll read that again. When the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, we, of course, will use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people. This is not a bluff. And those who try to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the weather vane can turn and point towards them. This then gives you the context of what he is doing here, which is to say these are now, and we've ratified this in the Kremlin, and the Duma is going to, pass legislation that which is the Russian sort of parliament, that these are now part of the Russian territory. This is Russia. These 4 areas will be part of Russia. And as such, if Ukraine continues to attempt to liberate, it is liberation, but for the Russians, it's it's not liberate, it's attack, actually. So if the Ukrainians continue to attack these territories, they are attacking Russia. This is actually Russian territory. And if they are attacking Russia, then we have the right to attack them with nuclear weapons. This is basically what this is all about. Conscription, the mobilization, was the one step he could do that wasn't nuclear. And that's the max he could do. There are some people saying, why are they missing out chemical weapons in this kind of escalation? So it's mobilization, and then it looks like nuclear. And people are saying, well, actually, there's another step in there, chemical, and I'm surprised they're just missing that out. It's kind of arbitrary. But the idea is that yes, gives him permission to use nuclear. The flip side is that actually they annexed Crimea back in 2014, and there have been attacks on Crimea. There have been drone attacks, and there have been missile attacks on airfields and on Sevastopol that haven't resulted in Russia, reacting with nuclear. So there's a bit of confusion as to, a bit of double standards in some sense as to whether Russia will actually do that, because they didn't do that with Crimea. But this is why they are staking their claims to those territories. This is their way of justifying the use of nuclear, arguably. Talking about the conscription, there is evidence to suggest that when they were doing all the polling down in these 4 regions, when the ballots were out and there had people actually going door to door, so you didn't really go to places to register your ballot. In a lot of cases, people came to your door with soldiers at gunpoint. You were, asked to fill out the form, yes or no. There is evidence to suggest that actually this was just a big data mining operation. In other words, they wanted to find all the people in these 4 regions who were at fighting age, all the men at fighting age, so that they can just conscript them. They are now in a position to know who lives where, what men there are at fighting age, and then they can force conscript them into the army. So there was like a dual purpose to those referenda, which is pretty interesting. The other thing is that concerning the mobilization, so the Russian mobilization in Russia, what this will end up doing, and this is something I was thinking about, not really seen any comments about this anywhere else, but this might open up the information highway. So what's happened during this war, very little information has got back to Russia and the people in Russia. You've had the troops that are here, right? But they have been Russian troops and conscripts. They actually had their mobiles taken away from them at the beginning of the conflict, and there hasn't been an awful lot. There have been intercepted phone calls and whatnot, but basically the Russian troops have maybe told their families about what's going on and how terrible it is. But the information hasn't really escaped from here back to Russia in the way that it very much might do with a mass mobilization. So if you've now got up to 1 million people from Russia and people who generally aren't too happy with being conscripted and having very low morale being sent into the front lines, you can bet your bottom dollar that there will be information, real proper information about what's actually going on down here, getting back to Russia in a way that the Russians haven't seen so far. And this might affect public perceptions of what is going on in Russia, which leads me on to the fact that actually recent polling in Russia is showing that the war or the special military operation is less popular than it has ever been. So here we see Putin's mobilization has had quite an effect on Russian public opinion. Less than half now tell pollsters that they want the war in Ukraine to be continued. In other words, most people want the war to stop. And that's a massive shift from before, and that's due to mobilization. Mobilization has not been a popular decision. So talking about the referenda, this is some evidence. So this is what some pro-Ukrainian has found outside, obviously some sort of polling station or somewhere on the streets. Ones with no ticked, burnt or half burnt. As you can see, lots have been burnt. Some are still there, partially unburnt. So that is evidence. I mean, straight away, that is evidence of voter fraud. I mean, that should lead in a proper. So if that happened in the UK, right, the election would be put on hold until that was investigated, right? But of course, that's never going to happen in Russia. But it's crazy. In a clear attempt to stop the flood of men fleeing Russia, the Kremlin has said it will hand out call-up notices to all eligible men trying to leave the country. So Russia is spending yet more money and more manpower to set up more draft offices at various border points. So this is like a double whammy. You're trying to get away from mobilization. Now it looks like you're more likely to be handed conscription notices if you are caught trying to flee the country. And that is Russia trying to stem this flow of people escaping, which has got to sort of really problematic levels. And in answer to the claims that the mobilization has been a complete bodge job with all sorts of, old people, disabled people that never had who never fought before being handed out conscription notices, the pro-Russian side of things are saying, well, actually, so Putin has come out and announced that actually he doesn't want these people to be mobilized. These were mistakes, right? That actually there's been a lot of volunteers that have gone to say, I want to join the army. So that's why there's a lot of people who haven't had previous experience fighting. They aren't reservists because loads of volunteers have turned up at conscription officers, etc., etc. How much of this is to be taken as the truth is obviously a different question. So this is coming from some Telegram channels. Putin demanded to correct all mistakes during the mobilization and to return home those who were called up illegally. Volunteers are turned back without an agenda, but those who should not be mobilized, it is necessary to deal with all this without fuss. Putin, that's from Putin, supposedly. Putin, it is necessary to understand in each specific case of illegal mobilization. So it goes on to say, those mobilized must necessarily undergo additional training. The cases when doctors during mobilization are enrolled as motorized riflemen and volunteers are wrapped back are outrageous. Only citizens in the reserve are subject to mobilization, primarily those who have demanded specialities and experience. It is important to deal with all the mistakes in mobilization without fuss, calmly but quickly, in detail and thoroughly. In the course of partial mobilization, many questions arise. It is necessary to correct all mistakes and prevent them from happening again. It is necessary, to correct all mistakes during mobilization, return home those who are called legally. The Prosecutor General of the Russian Federation must immediately respond to violations during mobilization. So those are different quotes going on to say that, it's the reason why there are all these people that shouldn't be mobilized being mobilized. They're just mistakes, and we will correct them as soon as possible. So on and so forth. So the big problems with mobilization causing lots of consternation and annoyance within Russia internally, which is reflected in polling that is showing decreasing support for the war. Okay, last couple of nuggets before I let you get to your day. In terms of what's going on around the Baltic states in Russia. Russia has redeployed up to 80% of troops from its borders on the Baltic states and Finland to plug losses in Ukraine, officials tell. So Jack Detch is a journalist. European officials said there could be just 6,000 troops left in Kaliningrad and the Baltics. In other words, historically, they've had very strong defenses around the northern European states because they are European NATO states or at least NATO friendly states who have either felt that Russia's a threat or Russia felt they're a threat, so on and so forth. So there's been loads of troops as well as equipment based around there. St. Petersburg has had a bunch of its S-300s, so air defense, taken out from there and brought down to the front lines. Now it looks like 80% of the troops up there have been taken down. This brings me on to this idea that, and I was talking to someone yesterday about this who said, well, if we, the UK, but this is the same for US, France, Germany, anyone else, Poland, even more so, if we are giving away all our weapons, surely this is leaving us really weak. But the argument is, no, it's not leaving us. Well, leaving us weak to what? Okay, it is amply been shown that Russia are not in a position to attack anyone. They can't even defeat Ukraine, right? So if we're giving Ukraine all these weapons, then we are not leaving ourselves weak to an attack from Russia, because Russia would have absolutely no capability to attack the UK or Poland now. Imagine if Russia went into Poland, a NATO country, that they would just they wouldn't and they couldn't. So it's absolutely fine for us. Now, America might be thinking about China. Okay, that is genuinely part of their calculation. So we need to keep enough stuff back to think about China and possibly to think about Taiwan, etc., etc. But is that going to be more naval before it is land-based equipment and whatnot? So my opinion would be give Ukraine everything they need. You might not have to do it straight away. It can be incrementally as such as it is now. But there is no point worrying about us being left weak in the UK, for example, because we aren't going to be attacked by anyone. We aren't going to be attacked by Russia. Or really anyone else. And especially, we are a NATO country. So if we're attacked, Article 5 of NATO says that all NATO countries will come to our aid. So there's strength in numbers. There's no problem with giving Ukraine equipment because, look, Russia are in serious trouble. Okay, a couple of other nuggets. Here is the size of a crater from a cruise missile in Dnipro. This is the devastation that is being wrought. What was this? Is this residential? I mean, if it is, that's a war crime. But that gives you some indication of the massive, devastation that can be wrought by just a single missile. So that is definitely worth considering. Another nugget here: Wagner commander, the number 2. Prigozhin's number 2 in the mercenary organization has been killed in Ukraine. So Terek. So this guy here sort of died in Bakhmut about a week ago. So that's a big hit. And there's that Wagner base that was here. I haven't heard much about that since then. So yeah, that's good news for the Ukrainians. And the very last thing I'm going to talk about is just how much of a social media war this is. I mean, not only am I doing what I'm doing, this is on social media, like explaining how this war is going. But look at the extent to which things are recorded in a way that we've just never seen before. And this is partly to do with the drones being used for reconnaissance. So they have this very much a utility for the forces, because without the drone, the drone is how you direct artillery fire or tank fire to blow up certain things, right? But at the same time, that footage is then recorded and whacked on Telegram or Twitter or YouTube. And we get to see what's going on the front lines. So here's a couple of examples of this. So this is a very rare bit of footage, which is, as it says here, a rare example of tank-on-tank combat. A Russian tank was destroyed by a Ukrainian tank fire a few days ago in the east. Catastrophic ammo cook-off included. The cook-off is when the ammo inside the vehicle blows up after an initial explosion or initial hit. So here we have a tank, just very slowly, sort of moving forward. There's already some fire, something going on over here. I don't know where something else has been hit or whether that's just a general sort of shell has gone off and hit. And again, very close to being hit, this tank. There's a bit of a cut there, so we unfortunately miss it, but then that tank is hit by the incoming artillery fire, and bits of tank come down. So that is hit by the Ukrainian tank fire, and then the cook-off. Then the explosion of some rounds inside. And look, there's movement there. After all of that, and then Bosch. And then so that's incredible. I hadn't seen that before. And here, in real time, here is not only is there drone footage, so not only is this recorded by a drone who is probably directing the tank fire, right? But you've got this guy over here with a camera is seeing at exactly the same time what is going on. So, and then, this Ukrainian guy is particularly happy about that. So it's just, you've even got multiple views on these things with multiple, multiple views with multiple people witnessing. So this is actually a Ukrainian jet being hit by a surface-to-air missile, and the pilot or pilots, I think, did eject. And so, that's the key part. Like I talked about the other day, the pilots are more precious than the planes, because the planes can be replaced. The pilots can be replaced, but obviously that takes 10 years worth of training to get up to the level they were. So you got another manpad going off there, or surface to air rocket or something. This, and again, firing all over the shop, and that plane goes down. So that was a Ukrainian jet, Su-24. Here's another example of how important drones are. So basically, this is a precision hit, and I'll talk in another video about how else you can get precision hits with shells from artillery units, because you get things like Excalibur shells that have a way of being able to guide themselves to a target, rather than firing a dumb munition that you need to tell the artillery crew to move a bit to the left, bit to the right, keep firing. Now you've got it. It's like, we've got this thing here, fire one shell hits it. Okay, so here's a precision attack, but the drone is obviously what is the key to this, because the drone is telling them, there it is. So there isn't these pock marks around, there aren't other shells going off, there's one shell that hits. And as soon as you have something like that, you know that they've used precision munitions. It's not just, so other times you'll get them, it's called walking in. They'll walk in the artillery fire until they eventually hit it. Something's hiding like this in the middle of a bunch of houses. They've hit that with a precision strike. So that's going to be an Excalibur shell or something similar to that. And I'll explain how that works in a future video. Again, here we have a Russian tank destroyed by the Kraken special unit in the east, presumably using an artillery strike. And again, is this precision? But look at the devastation that's caused there to that vehicle, and there it is. That's what's left. And that is artillery strike again. Is that precision? Can you see any other artillery hitting that? Again, we can't tell. We can't tell necessarily because of the editing of the video. So there might have been other artillery hits around there. And this just shows you, again, it's the amount of video footage coming on here. Now, let's assume that this has been edited and everything here is what it is. So sometimes you think they splice videos together and you think it's the same artillery shot hitting a particular tank, but actually it's a different artillery shot and they just splice that together with the tank being hit. And it's not all part of one actual bit of sort of true video narrative. Although those are things that happened, they're like two different events spliced together to make it look like one event. So you've got to be careful. But this, look at all the sort of footage going on here to give you an idea of everything that's happening. This is, this tank there. They are looking to blow up that tank with their own sort of tank artillery. Let's watch. So here we have the tank firing. Again, it's kind of walking in, getting closer and closer, and then you've got inside. So this is the gunner being loaded. I don't know if that's an automatic loading mechanism. It looks like it. And then and you see all these pock marks around. So this is evidence that we're not talking about precision. We are trying to walk in, fire. And then there you go. So it's just a little insight into you've got the crew inside the tank. You've got drone. You've got multiple drones, different angles up in the air, and it gives you a complete picture of what is going on. It's just quite incredible. But this is the kind of war that's being fought. It's very much a social media war as well. So an information war, and who can control that narrative online. Especially when you have so many pro-Russian military bloggers and Telegram channels throwing out information, as well as pro-Ukrainian. There is propaganda going on both sides. Anyway, that's the latest. I hope that was of interest to you. A few nuggets at the end. Thank you for bearing with me. Please like, subscribe, share. You can join our channel or my channel, and you can give thanks in all the other ways that are down in the description. But thanks for watching, and then until next time, goodbye.